So let's just do a quick review of what we've done. And I want to make sure a bunch of this is straight before we move on to the next one. But I want to go back and talk about these two specialized, they're called classes. On Wednesday, we're going to start writing our own class. Now, what a class is a spot somewhere tucked away in memory that has a whole bunch of methods written associated with it. Okay, and we're going to see that when we start on Wednesday. But for now, I want to talk about the math class. And if I want to get a method, and again, a method is going to be a working block of code, I have to call it by its name. We know what pi was, so that I can use the lines of code that are in there. We had another one called square root. But again, to get to these, I have to call the name of the class first. Okay? Taking a look at square root, I'm starting to think if I asked you to write a block of code for square root, you might be able to write that method. The method might look something like public static double, because remember my return type is going to get stored in here. It's a double. Here's the name of the method, square root. Here's my parameter list. It's only one thing in it. It gets the value of the argument. So the argument flies through the air and lands in the parameter list. What was the other name we keep calling our parameter list? Starts with an S. Signature. We've mentioned a couple of times, this is the method signature. Okay. Once I get there inside of the method, you know, you wrote a block of code to take that number and figure out its square root and return it, kind of idea. The class that we talked about on Wednesday of last week was kind of similar. Okay. This one's called the character class. Let's see, we had one, we would say character dot, just like we had to call math to recognize its class. Is digit, we passed in an A and we got back a true or a false. Sometimes this word flag is related to trues and falses. It's a data type Boolean. We use these right in if statements, if you remember. Okay, is lower. So again, these are going to be blocks of code. Public static, I'm going to return a Boolean. Is digit, I'm going to send in a character, C. Only one thing listed in my parameter list. And again, we could go into Google and say Java character class methods, and we get to see a gigantic list of all these methods that we can use. What do I have to pass in? What's the return type? So just having covered chapter 5, a lot of these should make sense. So these are two classes that are written and tucked away that we call when we need them. Okay, we don't always need them, but when we do, we call them. So taking a look at section 9.3 today, we're going to go and actually go a little more in depth with this class called strings. Okay, same idea. Somewhere there's a class written called string, and it has all of these things, all of these methods included with it. Now, we have to call these specialized. This one we don't. Years ago we used to, but now strings is so needed that it's automatically included in Java. So when we get ready to use things from the string class, we don't have to call the class name. The class name is already included when we compile. It's one of the libraries that are included. So let's take a look. Some string methods. We've already seen some of these. And if you go through in the book, you start to see a method starts with, where the argument is going to be some sort of string, and it's going to return a true or false if it starts with that. Another one ends with a certain string. You won't use a lot of these, but all of these are already written for us. Okay, and these are some methods for searching. Now, what are the two string methods that we've been using up to this point? Do you remember what they were?
Carat.
Charat, right? Or carat. I always say char, but it is character, so carat. What was the other one? Actually, it's down here for us.
Oh, string length.
String
Yeah.
length. Okay. Now, as you saw in the last two classes we talked about, I had to put the class name. Strings are a little different. I'm going to put in what we're actually going to refer to as the object name. And that'll make more sense on Wednesday. So now I put in whatever my string is, call the method, and it automatically knows, go to the string class and get the character at location 0 and store it in CH. So this one's a little bit different. I put the string name, not the actual word string. So that was one of our familiar ones. Like I said, we also had instra.length. Did I have any argument that needed to be passed in? Well, the answer was no. And my variable that returned was an integer. Things that we've been dealing with. Again, this is different than the character class. We don't need the class name. We just use the string name. All right, so like I mentioned earlier, we have two methods called start with. Here's kind of a big one that's used. It's called index of, and it'll take a string. It'll pass in, I don't know why I have oh, it's in blue. It'll pass in a character and tell me the location of that character. For example, string.index of, where is my A? Starts here. Finds the first occurrence of A, returns an int. Here's another one, index of, it looks for a character, but it also passes in another argument that says start at position blah, blah, blah. So maybe if I want to find all the A's, this guy would help me find the first A. This guy would let me move to a position after the first A. I could do it with characters. I could do it with strings. Here's another one, last index of. So a bunch of methods. Again, I could go and hit sharing my screen. I could go into, this was a big one that I Google. When you Google, my Google was math class Java. And when I get into the math class, we've looked at these once or twice, all of the methods that go with it. Here's my parameter list. Over here on the left is my return type. So all these blocks, little blocks of code, are already written. Quite a few of you became familiar with CEIL in the last program. That helped me round up the number of bags of mulch. Wait, not yet. Oh, skip that, rewind. We're not there yet. No, wait, we didn't do bags of mulch yet. No, forget it. You need seal. Put it that way. You need seal. Don't forget about that. There's lots as I keep going down. Hypotenuse. Well, that's kind of nice. Could have used that some time ago, huh? Using the method called hypotenuse. I could do Java string class methods. And I think it's going to take me back to that Oracle website. Are you able to still see my screen?
Yep.
And anything you wanted to find out here, here's if I have C, string C, ABC, substring 2, 3, again, on the left side of the dot operator is the string. Usually it's going to be a variable. And then on the right side of the dot operator is method names. And if we scroll down, what are these things? Constructors. Constructors are in the beginning. We don't need those yet. Look at all the methods, char at, concat. You all of these things I could use if I wanted to work with strings. Stop share. We have a problem, Houston. It won't let me stop sharing. Okay, so I just mentioned briefly, you can go to Google and you can look up all those different types of methods, and there may be some that actually work for you.
And about objects, would you, if for each object you make, would you need to import the necessary classes for each object?
Did we have to do it for math?
No.
Or math?
Did we have to do it with character?
No.
No, and the reason is because these guys, when I use their name, knows to go to that class. What about with strings? Do I have to have an import statement with strings?
No, I mean like it. Like if you're implementing something that the constructor doesn't have by default, or like that your main program doesn't have by default. If you put it in your main program, will that be sufficient to work for all of your classes, or would you need to import for each of the classes
No,
individually?
just in the main, you're fine. If I'm understanding what you're saying, just
And
in,
because the objects are different from the classes we've been doing because they're
Yeah.
not in the same
right.
text file, if I recall correctly.
So everybody don't listen to him. He's talking, he's making sense, but it's not something you have to worry about. Any other questions? All right. Sections 9.4 and 9.5. When we put the curriculum together, we only had so many days to work with, and that's something that got cut. You're more than welcome to go and take a look at. But what you need for program 9.1, everything you need can be found in 9.2 and 9.3. So what are we going to do today? I'm going to have you write a program. Here's the program. Password verifier. You're going to come in and you're going to have a method that asks the user to input a password. Then you're going to pass that password over to verify, where it's going to find out if the password is valid or not. It's going to return a Boolean. Okay, and then you're going to pass that Boolean into a display method that says, if it's true, then display your password is valid. If it's not, you're going to display your password is invalid. Kind of simple, but I want you to keep practicing methods. Now, how do we know if it's valid or not? Well, if a password comes in, it needs to be at least 6 characters. So if I check that, I can mark something called true. I could have a flag and say it's true. If there's at least one upper, true. I could go through it one at a time. If one of them equals an upper, then I'm good. Is at least one a lower? Is at least one a digit? We're not going to get into characters, but all of this will be done in this method. And the way I know it's valid is if this is true and this is true and this is true and this is true. Okay, so I want you to write a program, 3 methods in the main. That's all. Unless you want to put a run again option in, but you don't have to. You're going to type in a password. If I type in this A, B, C, D, 1, 2, is that valid? Well, it's at least 6 characters. There's one upper, there's one lower, and at least one digit. So yes, that would in fact be valid. This string ABCD12 would in fact be a valid password. Any questions?
So like I know you want us to use like the Boolean return type, but like you could also use like an integer or something. Like if it's true, you can put like a 0, and if it's false, like put a 1 or something like that, right?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. That's fine. Mhm.
All right.